My mom humiliated me on Facebook for living at home at 31, called me a leech. My family laughed and raised my rent. They didn't know the house was mine. I moved out at dawn. By Friday, they were being evicted. I stared at Mom's Facebook post for the third time that morning. The words burned into my retinas. Some people never grow up. Still living at home at 31, playing on computers all day. What a leech. 43 likes, 12 comments agreeing. Justine had even liked it. My ex-girlfriend finding solidarity with my mother's public humiliation campaign. You see this garbage? I showed the screen to my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The same face that had endured years of dinner table mockery stared back. Dad's voice drifted upstairs. Tell your son his rent's going up. Maybe that'll motivate him to find real work. Real work. I pulled up my laptop and opened the business dashboard. Revenue this month, $47,000. Last quarter, $140,000. Web development and digital marketing had been very good to me. I'd been quietly building an empire while they assumed I was unemployed. I took a screenshot of Mom's post, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence. Then I opened another folder. Property documents. Grandmother's will was crystal clear. The house belonged to me, inherited 2 years ago when she passed. I'd never told them. Let them think they owned the place where they'd spent decades tearing me down. My phone buzzed. Tabitha texting from downstairs. Mom wants you to do dishes. Stop being lazy. I closed the laptop and smiled. The real estate agent's voice was professional over the phone. The condo you viewed yesterday? You're serious about the cash offer? Dead serious. I transferred $280,000 from my business account. How quickly can we close? With cash? 2 weeks. Perfect. I hung up and opened my filing cabinet. Every humiliating moment, every snide comment, every financial manipulation, I'd documented it all. Screenshots, recorded conversations, bank statements showing Dad's constant borrowing that never got repaid. The lease documents sat in a manila folder. I'd had them prepared months ago, waiting for the right moment. Standard rental agreement. $3,200 monthly rent. First and last month due upon signing, 30-day notice for non-payment. Downstairs, I heard Dad on the phone with his bookie. Another losing bet. Another plea for an extension. Can you cover me until Friday? He whispered. My son's good for it. My son, as if I'd ever agreed to bankroll his gambling addiction. I printed 7 copies of the lease, 1 for each family member, 1 for my lawyer, 1 for the court filing. The document felt substantial in my hands, years of resentment crystallized into legal text. Mom's voice carried upstairs. He needs to start contributing or get out. I folded the papers carefully. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what contribution looked like. The moving truck arrived at dawn. I'd hired professional pacers, my computer equipment, clothes, and personal items loaded efficiently while the family slept. Dad stumbled into the kitchen as I set the house keys on the counter. What's all the noise? I'm moving out. I gestured toward the documents beside the keys. Read those carefully. He squinted at the lease agreement. What is this? Your new rental terms. This house belongs to me. Grandmother left it to me in her will. You've been living here rent-free for 2 years. Mom appeared in her bathrobe, drawn by Dad's raised voice. What's he talking about? The house is mine. I pulled out the will, the deed transfer, the property tax statements with my name. Has been since Grandmother died. I've been generous letting you stay here free. Tabitha emerged from her room, still in pajamas. This is insane. You can't just... I can. I have. I pointed to the lease. $3,200 monthly rent, starting next month, first and last month due by Friday. Dad's face went pale. We don't have that kind of money. I know. I picked up my laptop bag. Your problem now. Mom grabbed the property deed, scanning it frantically. This can't be legal. Call a lawyer. I headed toward the door. The number's on page 3 of the lease. The keys felt light in my pocket as I walked away. My new condo had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. No family photos on the walls, no childhood memories weighing down the shelves, just clean lines and silence. The lawyer called Tuesday morning. They're disputing the will. On what grounds? Undue influence. They claim your grandmother wasn't mentally competent. I laughed. Grandmother was sharper than all of them combined. She knew exactly what she was doing. The probate court agrees. I have the psychiatric evaluation she requested before signing, completely competent. Their challenge has no merit. By Wednesday, they'd hired their own attorney. Dad called 17 times. I let each call go to voicemail, then played them back for entertainment. Desperation crescendoed with each message. Thursday, I received the formal notice they'd filed for an emergency injunction to stop the eviction proceedings. I countered with documentation of Dad's gambling debts, Mom's credit card abuse, and Tabitha's student loans, all subsidized by their rent-free living arrangement. Friday arrived without payment. I called the utility companies first. Please disconnect service to the following address, effective immediately. Then I contacted the sheriff's office to schedule the formal eviction notice delivery. The lease agreement had been clear: 30 days for non-payment. They'd chosen to fight rather than pay. Their choice had consequences. Dad showed up at my condo Saturday evening, disheveled and desperate. The security guard called up before letting him enter. "You can't do this to family," he said when I opened the door. Family? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of Mom's Facebook post. This is how family treats each other? He glanced away. Your mother was upset. People say things. People like Tabitha telling her friends not to date losers like her brother? People like you promising bookies I'd cover your debts? I stepped aside. Come in. Let's talk about family. He entered reluctantly, taking in the expensive furniture, the view, the obvious signs of success he'd never bothered to notice. How long have you been? He gestured around the space. Making real money? 3 years. While you called my work playing on computers, I was building a business that grosses more monthly than you've made in the last 5 years combined. His shoulders sagged. We didn't know. You didn't ask. You assumed. You mocked. You used. I sat across from him. The eviction notice was served this morning. You have 72 hours. Where are we supposed to go? Not my problem anymore. He tried tears, then anger, then bargaining. I watched with clinical detachment as he cycled through every manipulation tactic I'd endured for 31 years. When he left, I deleted his number from my phone. The for sale sign went up Monday morning. I priced the house 15% below market value for a quick sale. By Wednesday, I had 3 offers above asking price. I chose the young couple with the baby. They reminded me of what family could look like when it wasn't poisoned by resentment and exploitation. The closing was scheduled for the following Friday. I met them at the house for a final walkthrough, keys in my pocket for the last time. The previous tenants left it in good condition, the wife commented, running her hand along the kitchen counter where I'd eaten thousands of silent, tense meals. They're gone now, I said simply. My phone had been quiet for 2 weeks. No calls, no texts, no Facebook messages. They'd found somewhere else to live. I didn't ask where. The silence felt like freedom. At the title company, I signed the papers and accepted the cashier's check. The house where I'd been humiliated, diminished, and gaslit for 3 decades belonged to someone else. I drove home to my condo, windows down, music loud. In my rearview mirror, the neighborhood disappeared behind trees and distance. That evening, I opened a bottle of wine and sat by my windows, watching the city lights flicker to life. My phone stayed silent. My conscience stayed clear. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in a world where nobody questioned my worth, mocked my choices, or expected me to subsidize their failures. I'd built this life one calculated decision at a time. Now, I could finally live it. The wine tasted better than usual that night. Maybe it was the silence, no demanding texts, no guilt-laden voicemails, no unexpected visitors with their hands out and their problems spilling onto my doorstep. For the first time in years, my evening belonged entirely to me. I scrolled through my phone, deleting contact after contact. Sarah's number went first, followed by Marcus, then my cousin Jenny, who'd somehow convinced herself that family meant unlimited financial support. Each deletion felt like shedding weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. By the time I finished, my contact list had shrunk to professional connections, a handful of genuine friends, and my parents, who'd never asked me for anything except the occasional dinner invitation. The irony wasn't lost on me that the people who'd raised me to be self-sufficient were the only ones who respected those boundaries. The next morning brought an unexpected lightness. I made coffee in my pristine kitchen, ate breakfast without checking my phone every 30 seconds, and dressed for work without the familiar knot of dread in my stomach. No one would be waiting in my office parking lot today. No one would corner me at lunch with a sob story and an outstretched palm. At work, I threw myself into a project I'd been neglecting, a comprehensive analysis of emerging markets that could position our firm ahead of competitors. Without the constant mental drain of other people's crises, my focus sharpened to a laser point. Ideas flowed freely, connections sparked between disparate data points, and by noon, I'd outlined a strategy that could generate millions in new revenue. My supervisor, Janet, stopped by around 3. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up," she said, reviewing my preliminary findings. "This is the kind of thinking that gets people noticed upstairs." I smiled, knowing she was right. This was what I'd been capable of all along, before I'd allowed myself to become everyone else's personal ATM and emotional dumping ground. This was the version of myself I'd sacrificed to maintain relationships that had never been relationships at all, just elaborate extraction schemes dressed up as friendship and family obligation. The days that followed fell into a rhythm I'd forgotten was possible. I arrived at work early and stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I joined a gym and actually went. I read books for pleasure instead of scrolling through social media, half expecting another crisis to materialize in my messages. I cooked elaborate meals for one and savored every bite. 2 weeks later, the promotion I'd been angling for finally materialized. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development, complete with a corner office and a salary increase that would have made my former parasites salivate. But they'd never know about it, because they no longer existed in my world. I celebrated alone with champagne and takeout from the city's most expensive sushi restaurant. No one called to congratulate me, but no one called to ask what this meant for them either. The silence felt like freedom. A month after that, I met David at a conference in Chicago. He was brilliant, ambitious, and refreshingly self-sufficient. The kind of man who paid for his own drinks and never once asked about my financial situation. When he invited me to dinner, I accepted without mentally calculating whether he was after my money or genuinely interested in my company. "You seem different from most people I meet," he said over dessert, his eyes reflecting the candlelight between us. "How so?" "Peaceful," he said. "Like you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." I almost laughed. If only he knew how much weight I'd shed, how many burdens I'd simply refused to pick up again. "I've learned to be selective about what I carry," I said instead. He nodded approvingly. "Smart. Most people never figure that out." As autumn settled over the city, I realized I'd stopped checking my old social media accounts entirely. I had no idea if Sarah had found another job or if Marcus had finally faced consequences for his gambling. I didn't know whether my cousin Jenny had found someone else to subsidize her poor choices. The curiosity that used to gnaw at me had simply evaporated. I'd become a ghost to them, and they'd become irrelevant to me. My new life had texture and depth I'd never experienced before. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed of visiting, invested in art that spoke to me, and took risks that felt calculated rather than desperate. Every decision was mine alone, every consequence something I could handle without dragging others down or being dragged down myself. Standing in my apartment one evening, looking out at the city lights that had witnessed my transformation, I raised a glass of wine to my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, confident, unburdened, free. I'd spent years believing that love meant sacrifice, that friendship required financial support, that family obligations trumped personal happiness. Now I understood the difference between genuine connection and elaborate manipulation. The people worth having in my life would never demand that I diminish myself to elevate them. The phone on my counter remained silent, and I'd never been more grateful for anything in my life. This was what happiness looked like, a life built on my own terms, surrounded by silence that felt like peace rather than abandonment. I'd finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away and never look back.